Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Alder Hour, your favorite way to end the working day. I'm Matt Alder. I host the Recruiting Future podcast, but also host the Alder Hour. This show is part of the Purple Acorn Network. So if you head over to purpleacornnetwork.com after the show, you can learn more about Purple Acorn. Also, the best way to find out about all the other shows that are on the network is to follow the Purple Acorn LinkedIn page. This episode and all the episodes and all the shows are also available as podcasts wherever you listen to your quality podcasts. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the show and let's get my amazing co-hosts up on the screen. Hey, Rhona. Hi, Jocelyn. How are you both doing?
Doing
Matt,
great.
good.
That's good. So you may have noticed, for Jocelyn, you weren't here last week, but I was broadcasting live from my parents' conservatory. A conservatory is a sunroom, just to kind of translate the English there. So I'm pleased that I'm back in my office studio and not having to cope with the seagulls and everything else that was going around. So Jocelyn, how have you been? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been doing really well. I wasn't playing like in-person Clue like you were apparently, but I did go on a cruise last week, which was really fun, and it was my daughter's first time out of the country, so we had a great time.
Ah, fantastic. Where did you go on your cruise?
Bahamas and Jamaica.
Very nice. Very nice. Rhona, what have you been up to? Been on a cruise or anything like that?
I have not been on a cruise. I wish I were. I love cruises. As someone who grew up in the Panama Canal area, you can imagine. I love cruises. But no, I've just been here at home. I actually, ironically, haven't traveled much this month.
Wow, I've done nothing but travel this month, but I've not been on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise, and I think I probably should because they sound like fun. So, in terms of the show, what have you got to share with us today, Rhona?
So I'm talking about business travel, even though I ironically haven't traveled this month. But yeah, I'm talking about business travel and what the trends are there.
I'm sure something all of us will have an opinion on. And Jocelyn?
Yeah, I'm talking about a situation that I found an employee that was fired for faking being sick so she could go on vacation after failing to bully her coworkers from canceling their vacations so that she could take hers instead. So more to come.
Wow, there's a lot going on there.
Yes.
There's a lot going on there. Well, I'm looking forward to talking about both of those things. But in the meantime, let's move swiftly on to our first segment, Points and Pints. Okay, so this week, because I'm back in my office, I still haven't finished the Beavertown Laser Crush, alcohol-free, obviously. Rhona, what are you drinking?
So I'm on the last of my Trader Joe's drinks, and it's the sparkling strawberry juice beverage.
How big was this box of Trader Joe's drinks? Trader Joe's.
It wasn't a box. I just went to their shelf and grabbed like every individual bottle or can that I could find, and
That's cool. Once you've drunk it, you've got to give us the verdict of what the best one was from all the ones that you had.
I think I already know because I actually went back and got a box. So we'll see.
And Jocelyn, what do you have?
Yeah, as always, slacking. I'm traveling right now. I took a red eye last night to California, so I am drinking my iced latte.
No, that's fair enough. All right, let me open this beer. I already know what this tastes like, so I don't know why I'm pretending that I don't. But it's pretty good stuff. Again, Beavertown, London brewery. Mostly owned by Heineken these days, but I'm not sure if they export their beer. But if they do, it's well worth a go. So, Rhona, give us the verdict on the Trader Joe's beverage selection. On that one first.
This one's good. It's good, but it's still not first place. For me, first place is the ginger beer, but I just love ginger beer, so.
That's fair enough. And good latte, Jocelyn?
Better than the average, yes.
Well, that's good. Okay, cool. So a bit more of that. Let's move on to our first article. So, Points and Pints, we drink, which is what we're doing, and we talk about articles that we have found in the news. So, this first one, Wade Foster, who's the co-founder and CEO of Zapier, Zapier.
Zapier. I interviewed one of their HR people, and she said it's Zapier.
Zapier. That's what I would have said anyway. I don't know why I said it. Zapier. Anyway, so we've covered a lot about CEOs talking about AI on this show. So, famously the Klarna situation, but also CEOs saying, we should be hiring AI first. We're going to lay people off. Everyone in our company needs to be, AI literate, all those kind of things. And even for companies where CEOs are not making grand PR announcements, there's this kind of sort of sense that suddenly everyone needs to be, AI literate and be able to use all these kind of tools. But you very rarely hear about companies actually offering training or support to get people there with what are very new tools. And I think the thing with sort of advocating for AI fluency without supporting people is learning about AI is really hard because we're talking about an ever-moving target. It changes on an almost daily basis. And it really is something where you don't know what you don't know. So, I think without kind of, guidelines on what's going on, then there's a real sense that people think they've mastered this thing and they've barely scratched the surface in terms of what happens. So Zapier have actually been on this journey for a couple of years now in terms of, AI fluency in their workforce. Now, they have a massive corporate DNA advantage because of what they do. They're a company that automates things and uses AI and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of makes sense. And basically for all of their roles, they now have this kind of this grid. I can't remember exactly what they call it. And it kind of defines what people should be able to do with AI in that particular role. And they kind of got 4 levels. Unacceptable is where people resist using AI altogether. Capable is where people are using sort of popular tools. Maybe they've got sort of 3 months experience with the popular tools. Adoptive, where people are actually really playing with it, embedding it into their personal workflows, making themselves more efficient. And transformative, which is all about doing things that weren't possible before AI. It's not that every single person in every single role has to be at that transformative stage, but it's just a really great indication of kind of where they're going. And they now, having used that to sort of get people up to speed, they now use that for hiring. So they know exactly, where they're hiring. So, I thought this is a really good example of companies really consciously thinking about this transformation and how it's going to take place. What do you think, Rhona? What do you think? What are your views on this?
I love this. I love that they are like on the same page. I love it for hiring. I love it internally for upskilling and all the things that I imagine that they use it for. I think it's needed, and I love that they shared it publicly so that other companies can also start talking this way, because it's like, yeah, oh, AI is cool. How do you evaluate whether your people know how to use AI, where you have to get them to AI when you're hiring? It's like everyone can say I've used AI. Like, what does that mean? So I am like team clarity and like specificity when it comes to like skills and assessing skills. So I love this.
Jocelyn, what do you think?
Yeah, in general, I mean, I think the concept in itself is really great. I just would have some follow-up questions. And one of them is like, how heavily is this being weighed in the application process? Because of course, you can't expect everybody's going to be in that like more transformative level right now. And do you need everybody to be at that transformative level? And if someone's in, let's say, like the capable stage where they would require some significant upskilling, but they're willing to learn, do you have a program in place to help them get there? Or are they going to easily fall behind with your workforce and not have the support that they need for the mission that you're trying to push for? So there are some follow-up questions there for that. And I also, and I know we've talked about this before in the show, just like really caution HR professionals, don't just follow suit because somebody else is doing it. Make sure it makes sense for your business too.
Yeah, I think they're really interesting points. I've actually got a podcast interview on Recruiting Future with their CPO, with Brandon, their CPO, coming up coming up this week, and I kind of did ask him some of those questions. And I think that the thing is like, as you say, not everyone has to be at that top level for every single job, because that really wouldn't make sense. But also, I think the other thing is really taking into account who they are and how long they've been doing this. So it's not something that I think another organization can just copy and paste, because they don't have they don't have everything that's needed behind that to do it. However, it's definitely a wake-up call for organizations to say they need to have a plan, around that upskilling, around just kind of defining where kind of AI sits. And I think that, a lot of organizations are sort of in the AI by default mode, where it's just kind of being rolled into a lot of tools that they use, and they're not really thinking about it strategically. So yeah, I think it's a really good example. But as you say, it's not something that people can just sort of shift and lift. They need to, really think about how it works in their organization. Also, we can talk about this for ages, but we should probably do the next one, which is the next article, which is all about change management and HR professionals. Now, this is a slightly confusing article. It's one of these ones that seems to go in various. I wonder whether some of these articles have just been written by really bad AI prompts. But apologies to the journalist if that's not the case. It just seems to sort of go all over the place. But the crux of it is, it's based on a survey and some other data that's been pulled in. 73% of the HR leaders that they spoke to, I think the sample was 5,000, something like that. So 73% of them were confident that they were prepared for change and confident about their organization's ability to manage change. The paradox here was actually they were also less likely to see any of the past changes that happened as successful, which seemed a bit strange. The biggest reason for change not being successful is cited as people-related challenges, which should be no surprise to anyone. And an interesting line in here about only 23% of transformation projects actually succeed. And most organizations are forced into crisis response or events-based change to actually make change happen. The article also kind of says that if you're a CHRO, there's a lot of change on your plate in terms of retention, internal mobility, talent acquisition, all of these kind of things. Got a few thoughts on this, but before I kind of share them, Jocelyn, give us your thoughts on this from an HR perspective in terms of change.
Yeah. Well, I question the 23% number because since change, since it shouldn't be episodic, it should be something that's continuous. How are you actually measuring the fact that a change management initiative has not been successful? So I do wonder about that number, but in general, I think a lot of this comes down to culture, this idea of like psychological safety, for example, perhaps distrust, burnout from change, and then the fact that, again, change often is not continuous. It's something that is episodic. So it isn't a part of the culture in itself. And so it makes it really difficult for you to get buy-in from individuals, for there to be miscommunication, despite an HR department's best intentions in getting change done right. And the thing is as an HR leader, you can follow all the best practices on what you need to do from a change management perspective. But if the rest of your leadership isn't on the same page, and if your culture isn't ready for change, it's not going to be successful no matter what, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think the point about psychological safety is just critical there, particularly with things like AI change in terms of that kind of stuff, and experimenting and understanding what's going on. It's kind of just really important. Rhona, what do you think?
I mean, I fully agree. And as someone who's self-declared, I guess, geek on change management, I could talk about it for hours. But a few things that struck out to me in this article were they're referring to it as a project. A project is something that has an end. Change should never have an end. So like right there, are you talking about implementation or are you talking about actual change management? Again, just like Jocelyn was saying, if you're thinking of it as this thing that has a beginning and an end, it's like, oh, it's implemented, it's change. Like you've just started the whole change management process. There were some things there that I questioned. It's like I have more questions on how this was structured, the survey, and on these numbers and things like that. But there was also something about people distrust it because too often change management is reactive. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense, because change management is like the whole planning of guiding an organization through change. Being reactive, I don't know. I have lots of questions.
But
Yeah,
that's just
no,
it, right?
agreed.
Is if like it's not culture ready, and if it's episodic, then of course it's going to be perceived as reactive to employees.
Exactly.
No, exactly. I mean, yeah, I kind of the same here. Really, it was a very weird set of statistics that were thrown together. I think the thing is, though, from watching sort of the way that technology changes business and all that kind of stuff for a really long time now, I think the thing that really resonates with me is the fact that it goes wrong because of the people, and they're not kind of on that, not on that journey. And I think that a lot of that is because it came across a really interesting model in from the world of kind of strategic foresight about this, in terms of the things that kind of sit behind change. So you've got the sort of patterns of behavior. You've got what happens, then you've got the patterns of behavior, and people sometimes try and change the sort of the patterns of behavior. Behind that, you've got the system structures, which is what a lot of these things are about. But behind that, you've got mental models in terms of how people think about things. And I think that very often they're not addressed. And I think particularly with talent acquisition, everyone has got a mental model about how recruitment works and how it should work. And I think that really kind of not addressing that kind of really holds back the change that we want to see. But again, we could talk about this all show. I mean, very, very big topics so far. So anyway, it's a situation. So let's go to the situation room.
Okay, so situation today, bear with me on this story here. There's an employee at a company that doesn't really plan her vacations really well, probably finds good deals online, some trip to the Maldives for $2,000, something like that. And people who've planned their vacation months out are now in the way of her ability to take a vacation, because employee A will be taking off and the manager will be taking off the same week. So it means that this employee can't take off because everybody else is off. So what she's known for doing is going around and bullying some of the other employees who've requested time off and gotten it approved, to try and convince them to change their weeks. And she'll do this by saying things like, "You're single, you don't have kids. My kids would be so sad and upset if they couldn't go to the Maldives. Like, how could you do that to them?" I mean, all this gaslighting and manipulation and just inappropriate behavior all around. And sometimes she's successful and people fold and they'll switch their vacation weeks around for her. In this one case, though, she was not successful and she threw a fit about it. And the woman who was writing this post said, no, she's going to a cousin's wedding. She was not going to give away the time off for this individual. So this individual that was posting about it ended up going on vacation. And when she came back, the employee who'd been bullying her was gone. And what had apparently happened was that while she was on vacation, she actually called out sick so that she could go to the Maldives, and then posted all of the pictures of the Maldives on Facebook. And her manager, they were suspicious because she'd called out sick when she'd been denied vacation time. The managers looked her up on Facebook, found the pictures, and ended up firing her for faking being sick. And I thought that this was an interesting article, not even because of the fact that she was faking sick to go to vacation, but actually more so that she felt so entitled to her time against people who didn't have families or kids. And so, Matt, that's actually something that I wanted to chat a little bit about today, is kind of this reverse discrimination. People talk a lot about, oh, okay, somebody's being discriminated against because of their marital status or their familial status or something like that. But often people don't think about the reverse discrimination, which is that if you are single or you don't have kids, maybe you're just expected to work more, or you're expected to not take vacation time because your personal time isn't as valuable as somebody who has a family.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the point that I took from this this very complicated situation. Yeah, exactly. And I remember I had a friend who had a job that involved shifts, which he was at that company or at that employer for sort of 5 or 6 years, and he was at the time single with no kids, and it was expected. It was a train company, and they ran trains on Christmas Day, and he was expected to work on Christmas Day because people with kids got priority. And there's a bit of that said, well, that makes sense that people have time off for their kids. But as you say, there is that sense of sort of discrimination there that those things are going on. So yeah, I think it's something that does happen, but it's also a perception that there's a perception around it as well. But then it is very difficult currently in the middle of the Scottish summer holidays, juggling childcare and holidays and all of these kind of things. So it can be a very tricky situation for people with kids. But it's it's a difficult one to manage. I mean, this was obviously unofficial kind of trading that was going on. What kind of advice or what do employers have policies on this? Where does it sit from an HR perspective?
Well, it's kind of tough because, of course, in general, you're going to have a policy in your handbook around anti-discrimination, and what happens when you violate those policies, right? But I don't think very many employers have a policy in there around who gets priority over who. Like it blow my mind if somebody had something like that. Like I would tell them, take that out of your handbook immediately, because that's going to
Yeah,
create so many
yeah,
issues.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
But yeah,
but I do think, if anything, Matt, it's more of like a culture thing, right? Like everybody needs to be treated in an equal fashion. You've chosen to have a family and have kids, and this is me with I have a family with a kid too. So I'm not like, if anything, I'm biased on the other end, right? But that's your choice. It's how you've chosen to live. Somebody else is single or they don't have kids. It's how they've chosen to live. It's important that there's an inclusive culture where people coming from every area of the world, so to speak, are being treated equally. So for somebody to be favored or prioritized because they have kids and can't find childcare, that's a really hard conversation for HR to have. But it is also equally hard to then turn back around to the person with no kids and say, yeah, sorry, they can't find childcare, so you can't take the time off. There has to be a culture of inclusivity and equality. And that's something that HR is just going to have to push for through practice all the time.
yeah.
Mediation, of course, that can always happen. It can be an easy conversation of, hey, this person can't find childcare. Would you mind? But enforcing it is a totally different story.
Yeah, and I think there's something around. I mean, obviously, it's quite different in Europe because we tend to have more, more days holiday to deal with. But I have worked for companies as well that have been very prescriptive about when people can take time off. Sometimes for reasons that didn't make any sense. So I once worked for an organization, and no one was allowed to take a holiday during the last week of the month because it was a sales organization, but actually didn't really make sense for everyone. It was just kind of a blanket policy. So, because the salespeople couldn't do it. So, I have kind of seen some interesting things around holidays and time off and all that kind of stuff that don't make sense. And as I say, that that friend of mine with the Christmas thing, I'm not sure that was ever written as a written policy, but it was certainly the culture that was what was expected. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a minefield, really.
Yeah. And you have to think too beyond vacation, right? Accommodations that you're putting in place. A lot of people have talked about, making sure that working mothers, for example, or working fathers, which is now becoming more of a topic and it should have always been in the first place, are being given flexibility with work schedules so that they can pick up their kids from school, handle childcare, etc. But is that happening for the people who are single who have, you know, their mom is sick,
Yeah,
or
absolutely. Other
you know what I mean? So,
reasons. Yeah.
so I hope that that's something that people talk about more and more, because I think here in the States, at least, that is still a missing piece, I think, in terms of from like an accommodation perspective or time off perspective or anything else, how people are being treated in the workplace sometimes could be perceived as unequal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, particularly about caring and all those kind of things. And I guess it's just down to just kind of really having that empathy and kind of really understanding that that sort of flexibility, it's important for everyone in kind of some degree. And I think that it's been great over the last few years that we've seen far more conversations about this, in terms of the need for flexibility and the way that companies think about it. We've had the whole remote working, hybrid working, get back to the office, malarkey going on for a while. But it's just encouraging to see that at least these things are being kind of being spoken about now. But as you say, there's probably a long way to go to kind of really figure it out properly.
Yep.
Absolutely. Jocelyn, thank you very much for bringing this to us. Enjoy the rest of your latte if you haven't drunk it, already.
Thank you.
That's cool. So I think we should move straight on to our guest. Hi, Sharon, and welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Are you drinking anything interesting? I'm still finishing my nose crush.
I am on the end of being sick, so I am drinking some, I think it's lemon ginger tea.
Nice. Yeah, I can't argue with that. So to sort of start us off then, could you just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Absolutely. My name is Sharon Papo. I use she, her pronouns. I am the co-founder and CEO of LGBTQ eLearning. We are a company that is building LGBTQ plus inclusive workplaces.
Fantastic. And tell us, just to give us a little bit more about your backstory, why you started the company, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. We started the company because I came to this work because I had my own personal workplace experiences where I didn't feel that I could fully show up as my best self, my employee. And I remembered feeling like I kind of had to check part of my identity at the door when I went to work. And I remember the cost that had and how that impacted my work. And I also remember one day when I saw a colleague of mine and her boyfriend had brought her lunch, and she went and met him in the reception area and said, "Oh, honey, thank you so much," and gave him a big hug and a big kiss on the lips. And I remember seeing her and feeling so happy for her, because it's so wonderful to see our colleagues happy and in love. And then I remember having this pit in my stomach, because I knew that wouldn't be okay for me to do. It would be frowned upon. It would have been perceived and experienced differently in that workplace. And I sat in my office and I had no pictures of my spouse, and it was right. I had a different experience, and when I left that company, I decided I was never going to do that again. And not only that, I actually ended up going on to run at some point an LGBT community center, where I had lots of conversations with people about how they were navigating their workplaces, and we were doing lots of trainings. And I realized that we needed more tools, we needed more information, and that so many issues could be avoided. And so many HR complaints could be avoided if companies had good information and better, more inclusive cultures. So we went about starting this company and creating these tools, and here we are.
Fantastic. That just just kind of makes perfect sense to me. However, we are unfortunately living through a time where there's a lot of sort of pressure on DEI initiatives. A lot of companies kind of rolling them back and things like that. I mean, how are you seeing companies react to what's going on? What's going on at the moment?
Yeah, well, companies are responding differently. So some are saying, look, this is what has built us into great companies, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm doubling down. Some are continuing, but they're continuing quietly. There was a training I did not so long ago, and the CEO introduced me and said, we're doing this training because this is in alignment with our values and it's so important to us. And we're also taking some language off our website because we don't want to be a target. So people are responding differently. Some are waiting and watching, and some are absolutely rolling things back. And the response has also been interesting to watch. I mean, you see companies who have doubled down, like Costco and Microsoft and Elf, and they've had they've had lots of revenue to support their decision. They've gotten some pushback, but people have doubled down and voted with their wallet, saying this is important to us. And the companies like Apple have said, this is not something nice to do. It's certainly not illegal. This is a business strategy that is building us into the best companies in the world. So why would we change it?
Absolutely. And I think that, I've always been struck by how strong the business case is for this. And it, that just seems to have been lost in all the noise. So I think if we were having this sort of conversation 18 months ago, I probably wouldn't even ask you this question, but just, talk us through the business case, for this. Why is it that it's helping Apple become, an even greater company?
Well, before I talk about Apple, maybe I should talk about Target. So Target, as you may know, they wanted to, I think they called it corporate neutrality. So they said, we're going to be rolling back some of our diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And they had been very strong. In 2016, they had rolled out a bunch of initiatives very publicly, and people went to Target because of it. People were very excited about that. And so I believe it was January this year, 2025, they said, we're rolling back. They didn't totally stop, but they definitely took a step back, and people were angry, and they lost 12% of their stock went down. They had 5 to 7% foot traffic reduction in all of their stores across 49 states. The children of their founders came out and said this is not alignment with our founding values. They were sued by stockholders saying you didn't assess the financial risk. So I just want to say that people sometimes think, okay, we're going to roll back and that is going to be a strong business strategy, but not necessarily. You have to know who works for you, who's buying your products or services, and of course you're talking to your legal counsel, and you're balancing all of it. But I think if we just look at Target, it's not like rolling back now is the clear right thing to do at all. And you look at Costco and Apple who are doubling down, and you say, wow, they're doing great. So I think the story is nuanced. And I think we all have to meet this moment looking at our own organizational values and how we want to move forward.
Absolutely. And, in terms of employees who are sort of directly affected by this, I mean, what's the impact on morale and retention for, companies that have rolled this back and companies who are still sort of moving forward with it?
Absolutely. There really is an effect. And there was a recent study that said that 97% of LGBTQ plus employees who were in affirming workplaces said they wanted to stay in their jobs versus 38% who were not in affirming workplaces. So if you look at employee retention, if those are employees that you value and want to keep, then I think we have to look at, well, what are we doing to sustain our workforce? And yes.
No, absolutely. And I suppose from that perspective, I mean, what would your advice be to to leaders or companies in terms of sort of navigating these kind of very difficult waters at the moment?
Absolutely. And we have been doing more training on addressing anti-LGBTQ plus backlash in the workplace now than ever before, because it's really on people's minds and people are having hard conversations. My background is as a licensed clinical social worker. And so we know that it really takes skills to hold space for hard conversations. So first of all, I want to say complaints are not necessarily a bad thing. We want to have workplaces where people can share what's on their mind. Way better that than there's just chatter that's not able to be addressed if it's that can create a growing chorus that you want to be able to be part of the conversation, of course. And I think it's really important when someone comes to you with a complaint, first of all, look for the commitment behind the complaint. What are their values? What do they care about? Really find out. So before we're reactive, really understanding, why are they concerned? What do they think is going to happen? What is the workplace that they want to build in, and how is their complaint impacting that? So I think that it's, are they feeling unsafe in the bathrooms? Is that why they're concerned about the bathroom policy and that transgender women are using the women's bathroom? What is their concern? And I think we have to understand that, and we have to validate where we can. Everyone should feel safe using the bathroom, including people who are transgender and everyone else. And so that's why we have an all gender single stall bathroom on the second floor, and anybody can use it. So, I think that it's really important, first of all, to try to de-escalate a situation and really listen with our body language, listen with our, make sure our tone stays calm. And again, you might want to do an empathetic guess. I'm guessing that you're feeling this way when you're, I think really trying to help people feel heard, because when someone comes to you and they feel dismissed, things will get worse. The issue will not go away, right? They might leave, they might, create a lot of havoc. And so I think that trying to de-escalate and then even if we don't give people what they want, I think the gift of hearing people deeply and understanding what's important to them will go a long way. But I think that it's also really important for companies to be very clear on their policies and their values right now. So, for example, one complaint I was working with a company on recently was somebody was wearing a MAGA hat, and somebody made a complaint about it. And it's like, well, do you have a dress code policy? If you don't, then you don't. But if you do, then what is it? And how, what is the impact both ways? So I think that it's how we're navigating this time, but I think we need to see everyone with their values as a starting point. And I also want to say it's so important to be taking care of yourself as an HR professional, because having these conversations is hard. And that we will not do as well when we are stressed out coming, when someone's yelling at us, right? We don't want to meet them. So if you have a hard conversation coming, how can you take care of yourself before? And what do you need to do afterwards? And I just want to say that is so important to moving these really hard conversations forward successfully.
Absolutely. And what do you see as the kind of the future of DEI initiatives in the workplace? Where do you think we're going? How would you like to see everything evolve?
Well, whatever name things are called, I think the ability to have a strong workforce, a diverse workforce where you can get the best of everyone you bring together is not going away. And I also know that when we look at the demographics of the world, certainly in the United States, and when I look at Gen Z, who right now is 13 to 28 years old, so in 5 years, they're probably going to be the number 2 in many companies. And when I look at the values of Gen Z as a generation, so many of these issues around diversity, equity, inclusion that are so controversial to maybe other generations are non-issues to so many people. So this generation is coming into leadership, and many of them are spending with their with their values, and they're conscious consumers. And so I really know that these issues are not going away. We are living through a moment in time. This moment is real. It is really hard, but there's backlash, there's forward lash, and we're going to keep moving. So I think we just need to keep showing up. We need to keep showing up from our values, and we need to keep doing the work.
And what advice would you give to employers about, being able to be more, more inclusive? What are the sort of mistakes people make? What are some sort of simple things that companies might be able to do to, to kind of just really improve what they do?
Absolutely. Well, look at your policies. It is always a great place to start. Also, training it can also be a wonderful place to start. Are you supporting your ERGs, whatever you might be calling them? I think also training putting some investment behind those values and being clear on the values that you have. And also, we can't stand for every issue, but what are the ones that you care about, and what are the ones you can move the mark on? And it's really great then to not only support your internally, but to also then support the community and being a great steward in our community, both with sponsorships and volunteer days and all the ways showing up. And that, of course, is a win-win in every way.
Absolutely. Now, a magic QR code has just appeared on the screen from from nowhere. Tell us more about how people can connect with you. What have you got coming up? What do you want to sort of talk about? How can people, work with you?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So we are offering some confidential executive conversations for HR, DEI, and L&D leaders. The next one is coming up actually July 31st, noon Pacific time. And this one is called Navigating the Changing Landscape of DEIB and LGBTQ plus inclusion. And so if people want to be part of that conversation to really share with their peers what they're doing, what's working, and what's hard, that we're keep holding these executive conversations and welcome people. And that's actually at our website, LGBTQ eLearning.com, and under the events page. And this QR code will take you to another page on our website, and it will give you the chance to win a book I co-wrote with Jack Canfield and some other great authors. Jack Canfield's the Chicken Soup for the Soul guide. It's called Success Redefined. It was an Amazon bestseller this last year. And if you can win a chance to get the book, a signed copy, and you also have the chance to sign up for our email list. We don't send out emails that often, but then you can know about the upcoming executive conversations.
Fantastic. And for people who are listening who can't see the QR code, it's lgbtqelearning.com/purple acorn. Before you go, I have to ask you a bit more about the book. Tell us a little bit more about the book.
Success Redefined. It's a really beautiful book, and really each chapter, many of the chapters are dealing with people's their own journeys about where what looked like failure really felt like an opportunity. And my chapter is called Look for the Pony, and it's based on when my mother-in-law Patty said to me, "Sharon, put you in a pile of shit and you'll look for the pony." And so I hope it's okay that I swore. So, so it's all about, even when things are really hard and you find yourself in a pile of shit, we're all meaning makers in our lives. And how can, not that things happen for a reason, because I don't believe that they do, but I think that we can always find the silver linings and the pony if we look for them.
Absolutely. Sharon, thank you so much for talking to me. Fantastic. We're going to move to trending or ending.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So this week, we're talking about something that's got me feeling some type of way. Business travel is back. American Express just dropped a report saying that 95% of senior business leaders expect business travel to stay the same or increase over the next year. Not decrease, not we'll see, but increase. Now, I remember when we all thought Zoom was going to kill business travel forever. Remember those days when we were all convinced that nobody would ever get on a plane for a meeting again? Yeah, about that. So here's what's actually happening. Companies are realizing that you can't build real relationships through a screen. 93% of companies say they can directly link business growth to in-person meetings. That's not just we think it helps, that's we tracked it and the numbers don't lie. But here's the part that really, really got me. Gen Z and millennials are more into business travel than older generations. So 88% of them see it as a perk versus 78% of Gen X and boomers. So even though, and this is the wild part, younger folks struggle more with wellness and productivity when they travel. And I would know because I'm a millennial that likes travel, but really I struggle with wellness and productivity when I travel. So they're basically saying, yeah, it's hard, but we still want it. That really tells you everything. And really get this, like companies are using business travel as a talent retention tool. 80% of them, that's what was found in this survey. They know that after years of being stuck at home, people want to get out. They want to be out there. They want to connect. They want those random airport conversations that turn into partnerships. So here's my verdict. Business travel isn't just trending, it's transforming. We're not going back to the old way where you just flew somewhere just because. Now it's strategic, it's intentional, and honestly, I think it's about damn time. Because the truth is, how many of your best work relationships started with let's grab a drink after this conference, right? So business travel is back, but smarter. And that's why it's here to stay. I think it's trending. What do you think, Matt?
What do I think? Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting actually. I think there's a few things that I would kind of I would say about this. First of all, it's really interesting that normally, or not normally, but in the past, whenever we've sort of hit tough economic times, those kind of things, travel bans have always been the first thing to happen. Reducing expenses, we're banning travel, all that kind of stuff. So, this flies so much in the other direction to that just makes it really interesting. I'm not at all surprised because I think there's that bit about the face-to-face connections. We both travel. I live in Scotland and you live in America, and we've met a number of times now because we travel to events and things like that, and it's just incredibly important. I think particularly in a world that is dominated by video calls and screens and things like that connection's really important. I think there's another bit to it as well, because increasingly the channels that we use to connect, particularly connect with people we don't know as well, or make new connections. So, LinkedIn in particular, we're being battered by algorithms and AI nonsense, and it's actually very difficult to kind of show up and be authentic. And I think that actually, video is obviously a kind of way of moving forward with that. But we're now living in a world of deep fake video, so. I think we might get to the point where actually showing up in person, face to face, is the kind of the best way to cut through all the noise and build those kind of authentic, genuine, connections. And it's always been something that's really important for me. I've always tried to do as much kind of face to face stuff as I can for a very long time. I've been going over, crossing over to the US for. About 15 years now, several times a year, just because it's an incredibly valuable thing to do. But, there is a burnout aspect to it, particularly kind of long distance travel. And I think that that's something that's important to consider, effect on wellness, effect on, all these kind of things. Even if you're not moving across time zones, it's still exhausting. And as we know, air travel gets more uncomfortable every year. There's also the environmental aspect of this in terms of having people travel around. I know something that needs to be considered. And I think we sort of saying this a little bit before we started the show. You talk about strategic travel there, which I think is really important. It's interesting that I see people kind of showing up earlier for conferences and staying later for conferences because they're building things around that schedule. Like, I like to do loads of live podcasts and things like that. So we kind of got strategic travel, but there is also toxic travel, travel that could have been an email, where you're dragging someone across the country for not a very good reason. So, there's a kind of a real sort of balancing act here, but I'm sort of delighted that people are seeing the benefit in the in continuing to be face to face.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's listened to the show and anyone who knows me knows that I'm 100% team remote work. I've been doing it for many years, and I don't want this conversation to be like, oh, in person is the only way to do it. It's like, no, there's definitely value in person, and I think it's probably growing because there's more remote work. And yeah, like you said, it's not. I'm not advocating for like toxic travel or anything that could have been an email. But yes, when you work remotely, if you have the opportunity to meet face to face with either your clients, especially with your team, things like that, that is important because there's just something about the in person. It doesn't mean that you can't have meaningful relationships. I've built meaningful relationships fully online with people way before meeting them ever in person. Um, but there's definitely something to in person. And I think really because of how work has shifted, is why we're seeing this increase.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this isn't about dragging people into an office for no reason other than presenteeism, or we want to check up on them, or all that sort of stuff. Because it's about it's about going and seeing people face to face, but using that time in a much more intentional way. Because it's kind of part of the overall thing. So like you, I've been working remotely for a very long time. So for me, it's a really important part of that to travel, to meet people, to kind of feed off that energy, but also kind of really develop, deeper relationships. And also, I think it's those, those chance meetings that sometimes happen. I can think of someone who I've known for many years now as a valued business contact that I met in a lift by accident. So it's those kind of things that I think are really important, and I think it's something that particularly I think if you're traveling for if you're a conference organizer or an events organizer, I think it's something that you really need to think about in terms of how you structure your event and how it works, because people's kind of needs are different now. And I think there are things that event organizers could probably do to really help sort of facilitate that more intentional time. Do you think?
Yeah, I love what our friends at Wreckfest. I'm trying to remember the name of their other company that where they do like these meetings with TA leaders before Wreckfest, before their conference, and it's like very intentional, specifically like curated group of people meeting for a specific goal. I like that. And I also like the conferences that are giving more like breathers, because sometimes you go to a conference and there's like literally no break. Like you don't even see lunch in the agenda. It's like
Yeah.
there's food, but like it's being served from this time to this time, but there's still stuff happening. It's like, no, let's give people time to like connect.
Yeah, I think that's important. It's the RO 100, which is
Yes.
the thing, which is which is great. I spoke at the one of the London ones actually a few weeks ago, and it was fabulous. I think that's important as well, because I think that there's a lot about inclusivity at these kind of events as well, because from a personal perspective, I can be very extrovert and sociable and things like that, but I'm also neurodiverse, and my social battery just will burn out very suddenly. And sometimes there's just nowhere to go. There's nowhere to kind of sit quietly or do all those kind of things. And I end up like, hiding in my hotel room for an hour before I can come back out again. And I know that, other people have, similar issues or, issues along those lines. So I do think that there are things that, could be done, as you say, like, the endless agenda with no gaps, not kind of having those facilities for people to meet or have those kind of spontaneous meetings or all that kind of stuff, or just not understanding that there are other things going on around your conference that people have kind of planned because they're all going to be in the same place. And in fact, I've known some event organizers be quite negative towards that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how how kind of things how things develop, really.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, here's to strategic, environmentally friendly, non-toxic business travel moving forward. Rhona, thank you so much for bringing that to us and being here on the show. And yes, again, we have come to the end of this particular Alder Hour. But don't worry. Purple Acorn has a huge amount of shows now. I can't even name them all, but things like the HR Morning Show, which is on tomorrow, From the Desk, My First Job, From X to Z, and many, many more. So lots and lots of content that you can see live, or you can see as podcasts or recorded videos. If you want to find out about all of those, then go to the Purple Acorn LinkedIn page and click follow, and you'll be able to get all the information, or alternatively, purpleacornnetwork.com. Again, this episode is available as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere else where you find the best podcasts. If you want to check out my longer form interviews, then have a look at Recruiting Future, also wherever you find your quality podcasts. And yeah, search for the Alder Hour as well. Anyway, we will be back next Monday. I'm already looking forward to it. This is Matt Alder, clocking out.